This episode of The Tome Show is brought to you by our patrons. You can support the show like them at patreon.com/The Tome Show. Welcome to Tome Book Club. Tome is a D&D news, reviews, and interview show, and I'm your Tome host, Tracy Hurley.
And I'm Jeff Greiner. In each book club episode, we discuss one D&D related book, spoilers be damned, in full book club style. This time around, we read Legends Lattes by Travis Baldree.
And with us, as always, is Eric Paquette.
Oh, bonjour. How are you doing? Do we all have our favorite hot beverage to talk?
Yes.
I saw Tracy sipping it from her mug, and I thought to myself, oh man, I wish I'd have gotten myself a tea or something. I'm not a coffee drinker, but I could do with a hot tea right now.
That's what I'm drinking.
Is it?
Yeah.
I finished my tea, so I'm also not a coffee drinker.
But tea is not novel in the world that we're reading about.
Yeah, I know.
Coffee is.
Well, except for the gnomes.
Except for it's some gnomes.
Gnomes.
Yeah.
So before we get too far into the book, next episode, which will record in March, we'll be reading Shadow Shaper by Daniel Jose Alder.
All right. Before we get started, I want to say thank you to our patrons. They help me pay the bill. You can help out too by going to patreon.com/The Tome Show and offering as little as $1 a month. We have since November added 2 patrons, which is a nice little thing. We have gone whole years without that much movement in a positive direction for the patrons. So we have a good stable crop of patrons who are fantastic, and I appreciate them, and they stick around for a long time typically. But we don't usually see much growth up and down. So it's nice to see 2 different people come in November. So.
Yay.
So I guess now we're going to talk about Legends Lattes. This is a book that was originally suggested to me by a coworker. I added it to my Audible library and then listened to it on a long road trip with my oldest son. Was it last year at some point? And I enjoyed it. So I recommended it to the book club here, and we jumped on board. It is a different type of fantasy book. It's clearly a fantasy world. You know, the main character is an orc and an adventurer with a big magical sword and all of the things, but it is not about adventuring. It is about what happens when you decide to stop adventuring. There's definitely a name for this genre of sort of like slice of life, making things work and starting a business and the intricacies of how to do that. And I've read and enjoyed many books like that before. There's a sci-fi series that was released for free about life on with a solar clipper. And there was a whole series of them that I listened to back in the Podiobooks days. And that's, I think, the first time I really sort of got into and enjoyed this style of book. And so when I started listening to this one, I'm like, oh, this is an interesting take. It's like 2 of my favorite genres mashed up into one. I like that little slice of life, how to make things work, how to get a business going and be clever and whatever sort of story. And I also like fantasy. So
It's a bit like anytime you go to in D&D when you meet up with the innkeeper or the tavern, and it's an old retired adventurer. So, well, this is one example of that.
Yep.
But instead of a tavern or an inn, it's a coffee shop.
Right. It almost, if we want to get into the mechanics a little bit, it feels like somebody is playing with the extended downtime rules, but instead of like hand waving large chunks of it, like they're role playing the hell out of all of it. You know, every roll is a whole thing, and every obstacle is a thing that to play out.
And if I can jump onto that real quick, for those who listen to the audiobook, Jeff, you did too, right?
Yeah.
The voice acting for some of the parts was really fun. Because he did different voices or at least he did on the one I listened to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and all the more impressive because the author read the book.
Cool.
So, but he ended up being there are some voice actors who do audiobooks and whatever who don't come across as well as this guy did, who is, I think, just reading his own book. I get the impression it's in that sort of lit RPG movement that's going on these days. And a lot of that is very I don't know, it comes off a very sort of DIY, right? And it's authors sort of cobbling these stories together and making it work on their own. I don't know if it was self-published. I don't know if the audiobook was self-published and that's why he did the recording for it, but it sounded as professionally done as any other audiobook I've listened to.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I just read about the author, and he actually says that Travis Baldree is a full-time audiobook narrator, so that's why his primary job.
So that's probably why he's good at it, because his main job is reading audiobooks, and then maybe he was inspired and just decided to write something.
Yeah. And before that, he was designing and building video games like Torchlight,
and
Rebel
Galaxy. He's not real. He's not real new to the whole thing.
Yeah.
New York Times #1 best-selling author, Locust, Nebula, and Hugo finalist, not winner, but full-time audiobook narrator. Okay, so he's not cobbling it together like a lot of lit RPG.
It was published by Tor, so I don't think it was self-published.
No. And the audio is it looked like was owned by Macmillan Audio, so that's a publishing company.
The fact that's his primary job makes sense that he might as well read his own book.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. So let's talk about what the book is about. This is the story of Adventurer Viv, the orc, I don't know, fighter. If we had to put a class on it, she's some sort of warrior, right? Who we learn had a taste of inspiration at some point during her adventuring career, and then she did the research and she laid the groundwork and she did the work to build towards a retirement. It wasn't just like I'm done, let's go and sit in the tavern all day sort of thing. It was I went on an adventure once and I ran into this gnomish drink called coffee, and I purchased a coffee machine to be delivered to this town, and I researched the town and figured it was going to be the perfect town because it's at the right intersection of ley lines, and that's important because I also researched that there's this lucky magic stone that you can get from this certain type of powerful monster, and there's not a lot of those monsters around, and so she did the research of figuring out how to find one of the remaining ones and made a deal with her adventuring party, y'all get all the loot, I just want the stone, and then I'm gone and I retire, and you needed that to sort of be activated by the ley lines, and so that's how she just she did the work, but mostly off camera before the book started, to figure it all out. And that's really part and parcel with this sort of story, right? Is that it's about being clever, and it's about doing the work, and it's about figuring out how to make things work when it doesn't seem like things are going to work.
Yeah, and it was interesting because that stone, on one hand, sounds like it's a good luck stone or whatever you want to call it, but it has a little bit of an interesting twist. I don't know if we want to get fully into it quite yet, but she ends up thinking that all of the good things that are happening in her life, including she puts up a job on the job board she needs someone to run the store with her, and this succubus comes in to apply for it. There's a little bit of we're only going to be serving coffee here, kind of wink, right. Wink, that happens, and she's like, yeah, of course. But she thinks of all those things that happen, the ability to find that building, ability to find a pastry chef out of nowhere, and all of that is all because of the stone. And in some ways it is, but not quite in the way that she thinks, right?
Right. No, that's exactly right. She goes through the entire story thinking that it's just a lucky stone, And because of the luck of the stone, maybe that's why all these good things keep happening, and what have you. We do, by the very very end of the book, have another retired adventurer who's much older and wiser, comes along and says, "Oh yeah, I remember these stones. There used to be all kinds of stories about them, and legends, and that's why the was it the Scalvard Queen that you get the stone from. That's why most of them are gone. Is that people all heard these stories about them being lucky stones, and they went out hunting them, and that's why they're so hard to find now. And also, it doesn't really work the way you think it does, and then explains how it does work. And I mean, we can talk about it now, or we can get into it later. It's a bit of a
Well,
twist,
and I
but
think and we can talk. Like, I think the one last thing is just she gets so anxious about it because there is another character that was part of that party when they got it,
mm-hmm.
who is trying to take it away from her, right? So she's about to lose everything if the stone goes away. And then, like you're saying, she finds out the real reason, like way it works, which is that the stone draws like upon like, and so it's really just increasing what's already there with her and the other people that come together to create the thing.
She's a good-natured, witty, hardworking person, and so it sort of attracts other good-natured, witty, hardworking people to come along. And so by the time the we're really skipping to the end here, but by the time the sort of villain of the story, the former party member, comes and steals the stone back, it kind of doesn't matter because she's already made the friends. Because the real magic, it turns out, literally is the friends she made along the way.
Yeah.
Is a stone that enhances herself, and rather than just being externally lucky.
Well, and it's also like it also means that the stone is super not helpful for the rogue former party member character who stole it, because like it's just going to attract more distrustful assholes to him.
Yeah.
Because that's who he is.
And it's great because I forget what term they use for the woman that's kind of like the local organized crime person
the madrigal.
The madrigal, yeah. So there's this part where like the madrigal overall, like that group tends to get like protection money from various businesses, or at least that's how it's approached to her originally. And then she does meet the leader, the madrigal, and that woman is, overall pretty nice. And she thinks that Viv thinks that she's gonna want the stone, and she doesn't. She turns that, like, she doesn't even try really for that, right?
It makes you wonder if the madrigal knows how the stone's magic works.
Yeah, because she's super like, yeah, no, I can't use it the same way. And like, and I think also it helps the madrigal know that this is a good person creates wonderful pastries when they get the pastry chef, that it's better just to have this person in your neighborhood, which was kind of a cool read, I think.
Right. No, I like that. I mean, there are definitely moments of action in the story, but this is not an action story.
Yeah.
Like the problems are not solved by pulling out the sword. The problems are solved through relationships and through being clever,
and hard work of working and all that.
It's very much if Star Trek was fantasy. Like, it's the kind of story that you see in Star Trek. Like, we're going to fix this by cleverness and being nice and diplomacy and all those things.
Yeah. So we have Viv. Then we have Tandri, the succubus, who's the assistant. That's the one that shows up.
We skipped right over Cal. So when she first shows up in town, she finds the old larder that it's a nasty horse stable basically, that's been owned by a drunkard who doesn't know what to do with it and can't seem to unload it for some time, and but it's at the perfect intersection of the ley lines that she was looking for. So she finds it, she buys it, and then she runs into what they call it in this story a hob, and I don't know if we're supposed to interpret Hob as in, I don't know. In my mind, it's like a goblin character.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So because we clearly have very different like species.
Yeah.
Than or, like a rat person, the Hob, which evokes to me hobgoblin, but I didn't get the impression he was like a big character like a hobgoblin. So that's why I'm thinking goblin.
Well, in English mythology, a hob is also his household spirit type thing.
And then we have the succubus, but a succubus, like if there was a succubus just wandering around water deep in the Forgotten Realms, like that would be a big deal. But she's kind of played off more like in D&D how you play a tiefling. A little bit, it's rare. She's a bit of an outcast, but it's not unheard of, sort of thing. So there's other than Viv being an orc, and I guess one of the adventuring party is a gnome. So we have orcs, we have gnomes, we have dwarf. Rune is a dwarf. And I think the bad one, is it Finis? Is that his name? Something like that. I think he's an elf. So we have sort of the standard classic D&D species. But then we don't have the sort of tertiary species or secondary species that you see a lot in D&D. Instead, you have all these other things that are kind of close, but not quite there.
Right.
So Cal is just a random carpenter that she happened to see on the docks working on a boat. And she's like, hey, I need a carpenter who's got a strong work ethic and attention to detail. And he's like, I mean, I'm not an expert in doing these things, but I'll come and give it a shot. And of course, he's got the work ethic that and enough of the general carpentry skill that he's able to do a brilliant job fixing up the shop and turning the larder with a hole in the roof into a shop and get everything ready to go. And then we meet Tandri. And then the coffee shop gets going, and you sort of get the story of how does she and Tandri work together to try to attract those customers to come in. Like, it's hard to think of a world where you don't know, you open a coffee shop and people come and check it out because people like coffee. But in this world, like, nobody knows what coffee is. They know what tea is, but they don't know what coffee is. So how do you introduce coffee to a population and then also convince them to come and be a patron at your shop? Of course, given the addictive nature of coffee, once you start building a patronage, it sort of snowballs pretty quick, and it quickly becomes a successful business. And then through the course of that, there's a I don't know, some sort of magic user character, Hem, who becomes a patron unwillingly. Like, he just wants to hang out in the shop because he notices the ley line connection and notices that there's something weird going on with the ley lines. And Viv suspects that that's a function of the Scalvared Stone that she has buried under the flagstones in the shop. But doesn't want him to figure that out and whatever. And so they eventually, and it just annoys them that he's there all the time, but he's not a paying customer. So eventually they start implementing a rule of like, dining room is for paying customers only, sort of thing. And he starts ordering drinks, but he doesn't really like hot drinks. So it doesn't appeal to him. And it says, well, maybe if there was something to eat. And she gets the idea of, okay, well, there was a ratkin in here earlier that was covered with an apron covered in flour. Let's see if he wants to come and be a baker. And Thimble just sort of says, yeah, that'd be great, or I guess doesn't say. Mostly doesn't talk. He talks every now and then, but mostly he just like gestures and nods and things.
He says one word here and there.
Yeah. And mostly when he's trying to communicate other ways and people just don't get it, he'll eventually break down and give you a word. And it turns out Thimble is a brilliant baker who makes cinnamon rolls the size of your head, and nobody's ever heard of a cinnamon roll before. And if you live in a world that doesn't have cinnamon rolls and suddenly there's a cinnamon roll there, I can understand how that would be awesome, right? That's an incredible thing to be introduced to. And then he invents, what do they call it? They call it thimblets, which are like little crusty cookie sort of things that you can dunk into your coffee. And I know that's a thing, in different cultures, whether that's a scone in England or it's like a biscotti, whatever. And then later on, he also invents the chocolate-filled croissant. And that was also a big deal because like chocolate was a thing. He found it, but it was really rare and nobody had ever really heard of it before until he started making these croissants. So that gives us Thimble. We've also met the magic user Hem. We have the Thieves Guild led by the Madrigal, who, as we've already spoiled, through most of the first half of the book, they assume is a man, and then she meets the Madrigal, and it turns out it's a woman. Surprise.
Who hates jerks.
Who hates jerks. And so wants to make sure that her employees are not being jerks, because one of her minions is stalking Tandry. And that becomes a point of contention where Viv is able to resolve it, not through violence, but through threat of violence. And then also I recently met your boss, and your boss doesn't like jerks, and you're being a pretty big jerk. We also at some point meet the farmer kid, Pindry, is that his name? Who comes along asking to play music.
Like a bard.
Yep. And it turns out the first time he comes and plays music, it just shocks everybody because he's effectively playing a magical version of an electric guitar. And he's doing like heavy metal, and people are not ready for that. So he comes back later with just a normal lute and plays some like folksy music and builds up to something a little bit more, I guess, modern by our standards. Yes. And we occasionally see her former party coming in. Rune comes with one of the deliveries. I think it was of the actual coffee maker. Rune was the dwarf that was previously in our party who just wanted to pop in and check in. So he took the job of escorting the delivery, but also gives her a stone to call him, and what she ends up doing later, because the other party member, the rogue who just doesn't trust anybody, Finnis, I think was his name, comes along and is making lots of threats and whatever. I forgot there's also a coffee shop cat that just sort of wanders its way in.
Just a regular cat, right?
Yeah. As long as you accept that it's a regular cat the size of like a saber-toothed tiger, yeah. It's a dire cat.
Dire cat.
Named Amity?
Amity, yep.
Yeah, and then Finnis. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I know you already mentioned him, but the old-timey gnome adventurer, who becomes is friends with Amity.
Yep. He's an old gnome adventurer who comes in every day and plays chess and becomes a regular patron, but he's playing chess against nobody, and it drives Tandry crazy because she can't figure out how the other chess pieces are moving, and it's never like she never sees him doing it, but there's nobody else there, and there's speculation of, do we have a chess playing like ghost in the shop? What's going on? Until eventually Viv asks him, and he explains that I'm making the moves, but I'm not making the moves now. I've already made them. And so that's your first hint that there is some weird time things going on with this gnome adventurer. I wonder if he's not going to also show, because even at the end of the book, he talks about, you're going to be okay. And she's like, I think you're right. I think it is going to be okay. The shop's going to be being fixed up and everything's going to be all right. And I agree. I think everything's going to be okay. He's like, oh yeah, that too. That's also going to be okay. Like he's implying that there's this other stuff elsewhere in the timeline that's going to turn out okay. And I wonder if that's not going to come up in one of the later books.
Yeah, well, and he mentions like after so one thing we skipped over is that the shop has a complete catastrophe, is burned into the ground, and then
Yes.
gets rebuilt.
Yeah.
Right? And he comes back after he's rebuilt. He's like, oh, this is how I remember it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, he's a fun character. If we talk about D&D inspiration, like he's a character I like, but I also like the idea of playing chess against yourself from a different point in time. And I think that's clever. And there's a part of me that either in an NPC or a character that I play, if I ever get to not DM at some point, or introduce a magic item to one of my players, that they can whatever, where you play chess and the pieces against you move on their own, and it turns out you discover that the pieces are moving because you moved them at a different point in time, and the chessboard like experiences time differently, and what whatever. I think that's a fun little.
You could even do it. You could even do it that the chip goes. It is at a different point in time. It is when after you have died and you are now a ghost.
Sure.
It's like,
sure. So I think that's a fun little quirky thing that I can very easily put into one of my games, and I think would go well. I like the idea of the time traveling gnome that never quite knows where he is in time, just sort of popping into the stories, and that's the kind of character that could show up like campaign after campaign after campaign if your campaigns are in a shared world. And boy, if I had thought of that 6-7 years ago when I first started the campaigns with my current group, that would have been cool. But I can file that away until the next big meta campaign starts in a few years. So
that's when the first scene that character shows up and he apologizes that he's late.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that's a style of character you see in other kinds of stories too, but it's fun.
Yeah.
And I think the chessboard playing a game against yourself is a clever new addition to that trope. And that you could, like, I could just throw that chessboard at a player and it's just their chessboard. I oftentimes do like hooks at a session 0, like, hey, one of you has this experience, or one of you knows this person, or whatever. I could be one of you owns a magical chessboard that doesn't experience time in the same way, and you keep playing chess against yourself from a different time, but you're not actually there.
Yeah.
And that could be a fun little thing that they could latch onto to sort of flesh out their character. So Tracy already got there for us, but we sort of get a bit of a budding friendship romance between Viv and Tandry. And eventually the storyline of Finnis wanting to steal the Scalvard Stone comes to a climax wherein he burns down the shop and in the chaos steals the stone and runs off. And ultimately, like, I guess, unlike a traditional story, like, it's not like the good guys triumphed by stopping him from doing the horrible thing he wanted to do. He did the horrible thing and then faced consequences for it because he didn't understand the thing he was stealing. And it turned out she was going to be okay because of the thing that it actually did in terms of the stone bringing together like-minded people was both a punishment for him and a reward for her because she's a good person and he's not.
And it solved some of the problems they were having, right? Because, like, they were so successful with the pastries, but they needed a bigger stove to keep up with demand in our oven, keep up with demand, but they didn't have room for it. And she didn't really get a bed and stuff like that, so she was kind of sad at where she was staying and everything. So the bright side, I guess, of it burning down is they were able to rebuild it to what they needed for the next stage.
No, they rebuilt it. They rebuilt it bigger. They rebuilt it more customized to what they actually needed with the bigger kitchen. Because originally she didn't even want the kitchen. She's like, I'm just making coffee. I don't need a kitchen. I don't need a stove. I don't need any of this stuff, Cal. And Cal's like, yeah, but we're, you're going to live here. We might as well put a kitchen in. And then it turned out it was crucial. And then it was very quickly, by about halfway through the book, maybe 2/3 of the way through the book, like, hey, we really need a bigger kitchen. Thimble's not able to keep up with the demand for cinnamon rolls in particular at all. And more, a second oven or a bigger oven or both would go a long ways. And this allowed them to do those things. And instead of her just sleeping in the loft on a bedroll, build a couple of bedrooms and put beds in them and dressers, and then invite Tandri to move into the second bedroom, because Tandri was hired as to help out and to be a server and whatever. But it was explained even from the beginning, like, sure, there's potential for growth, and Tandri just sort of made herself invaluable. And it was very clear about 2/3 of the way through the book that Viv's like, you're not an employee, you're clearly a partner in this project. And actually, at the end, after it was all rebuilt, because Viv had basically given up and had settled into sort of a depression. And it was all of her friends that are like, nope, we're just gonna do this, and the supplies just kept showing up, and workers just kept showing up, and some of them were patrons and friends, and some of them, it is suspected, were from the Thieves Guild, from the Madrigal, but they wouldn't talk about that. And eventually it was rebuilt, and she's like, this is fantastic, and you're all so invested in this, and she basically gave everybody a partial ownership into the new Legends and Lattes shop. And her sword, which got melted and destroyed in the fire, or warped or whatever, became part of the new sign out front on the Legends and Lattes sign. Black blood, the sword.
Yeah. And to me, one of the really nice things about the book as I was reading it is just they were mostly open to change, like growth and stuff like that. They communicated with each other. They still faced obstacles together, and things like that. But it was almost, motivational or like, here's how you could do things. Here's how things could work if we work together and things like that.
Mm-hmm. The challenges was mostly one person not seeing how to do it, but someone else suggesting something, and then like, oh, yeah, so different perspective and stuff like that.
Well, and Viv never solves the problems that she has by getting out her sword and fighting.
Right.
But the conversation happens on a regular basis, and it seemed early on in the story she was much more inclined towards that solution. Like, she didn't want to pay the protection money to the Thieves Guild, to the Madrigal. And she was prepared to fight over it. She put her big giant magical sword up on the soffit or the mantle or the beam or whatever or behind the counter or whatever. So as a warning to the Thieves Guild, like, don't be coming around here. I can hold my own. I can take all y'all on. That kind of thing. And she kind of is able to avoid it then. And then later in the book, when she actually calls in the rest of our party for advice and for help, they're like, well, why don't you just go and take care of it? Why don't you just go find the magical, hunt them down, and do like we've been doing for years as adventurers? And Viv's like, I thought about it, and I could, and I'm pretty sure I could win, but that's not the life I'm trying to build for myself. And she's now making a conscious decision of like, I could go solve this problem with violence, and it's just not the life I'm trying to live at the moment. And I think the sword being warped and beyond use and incorporated into the sign at the end is a nice sort of symbolism of like, we've moved past that point in our lives.
Yeah.
I am curious. So this has been done to great effect, but I always have to think about it a little bit. When you have a male author writing a story that is primarily about a female protagonist, and how that's being depicted. Like, I've seen male authors write female protagonists, and it goes very well. But I've also seen it done poorly, because it's hard to write from a different gender's perspective when you've never been that gender. So I'm curious how we think he did.
Curious what you guys think first.
I mean, I didn't notice any particular problems.
To me, it looked like a character. There was no focus, I could say, about feminine traits or a lot of that. It was just treated the character of Viv as her own type thing. So that's what to me I read. So
and Viv is also a bit of is an orc and a fighter, and so she's a little bit more rough and tumble anyway. So maybe it masks some of the more masculine traits that she might have because of that's the nature of who she is as an individual.
Yeah. Well, the thing that stuck out to me is we do have a number of male characters, right? But we also have a number of female characters with Viv and Tawndry and Madrigal, the Madrigal, right? And they're all a little bit different, and they get to talk to each other, and it's not always about men.
It definitely passes the Bechdel test, right?
Yeah, and yes, and I couldn't quite tell if Viv might be like somewhat neurodiverse or something too, because she's like some people will always miss the getting more romantic or whatever type of thing, but she seemed to really miss it at first, whereas other people were saying, "Hey, we see what's going on, good for you," and she's like, "Yeah, no, I really enjoy the shop, it's great."
Yep.
So I thought it went pretty well.
Okay.
Even the succubus thing went pretty well because like there was that initial. She asked some questions as kindly as she could, and then Andre got upset, right? But they worked through it really quickly.
Right. Yeah. No. And I think it's like, and I have to assume this was intentional, but like, you're right that we have male characters, we have female characters, but whereas the stereotype assumption is usually male, and then if it's not a male character, it's a thing. In this case, the default felt like the default was female, and then there were a handful of male characters as well.
Yeah, and there's no queen bees, right? Even the Madrigal is helping a sister out or whatever you want to put it, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that you point out her being clueless to flirtation, if you will.
Right.
So when we first decided to read this book, I didn't start listening to this book. I actually started listening to the sequel. So there's a book that comes after this one. The sequel book is actually, well, it's framed as coming after this book. Like it starts with a scene of Viv and Tandry, and there's a relationship and whatever. And then it's like like 95% of the book is Viv reminiscing and telling the story of the past. And there's a love interest in that story as well. And in my mind, like the Tandry thing was less obvious than it was in the second book. Like it's really hitting you over the head that like, no, this girl is into you and she's just not getting it at all. So for people who might be interested, the sequel is called Bookshops and Bone Dust. And it tells the story of Viv still in the middle of her adventuring days, but she has a major leg injury and can't go off adventuring. She needs like 6 months or whatever to rest up and recover. And while she's rested up and recovering and hobbling around on crutches and whatever, she befriends somebody who is struggling to get a bookshop to be successful. Like the bookshop is losing money. It was inherited from dad or whatever. And so Viv comes in basically just bored out of her skull because she's used to running around fighting things and needs entertainment, and finds the bookshop, and turns out the owner of the bookshop is really good at reading people and figuring out exactly what kind of books that they would be interested in, and is basically giving Viv lots of romantic sort of smut to read, and Viv is totally into it. And of course, every shop has to have a pet. So there's a pet. They don't call it an owlbear. It's basically like a little mini griffin but it's basically like a little owlbear cub. So that was a fun story, and it's largely the story of how she got her sword. The shenanigans that take place in that story, and it's how she got Black Blood. So,
and that must be why they mention books multiple times in this book, the first book.
I mean, assuming that the author was thinking ahead to that, yes, because she does mention several times that she likes to read, or she talks or thinks about books, whatever. No, I noticed that too, especially the second time. The first time around, I didn't notice that as much.
Well, and Tandre has a line too for someone who loves books so much, you have none in your room.
Right. Yep. And you sort of get the impression that this sort of prequel sequel is sort of the story of how she started thinking about, maybe it would be okay to settle down and make friends and not be an adventurer or whatever.
Right.
So I'll be curious to see what the book 3 is about, because book 3 just came out in mid-November, and I have not yet added it to my library yet and listened to it. But
one thing I did notice is the fact that since Viv is an orc, traditionally in books and all that, they tend to be aggressive and all that, so it's very predominant in showing that when she's not aggressive, does that, and she knows, it really shows and all that, and which is good. So.
All right. Any other thoughts or bits of conversation for Legends and Lattes? Am I working under the correct assumption that I'm the only one who read the short story at the end? Is that right?
I did not read it.
Okay.
I think. Well, was it at the end of the audiobook?
Yeah.
You're saying?
Yeah, there's like a one. Oh, did you get to the end of it?
Yeah, I can't remember it, but
okay. It was sort of the story. It's also a prequel story. It's just a short story. It's a 1 hour sort of chapter in the audiobook after the book is done. And it's telling the story of, like, she's with her adventuring party. She already has Black Blood. The whole adventuring party is there. They're in this other town, Azimith, which we hear from Legends and Lattes is where she first ran into coffee, the gnomish coffee, and started getting the idea for the shop. It's mostly the story of, like, hunting down this monster that's been hiding, who they call a doppelgrim instead of a doppelganger, but it's basically a doppelganger. And the party sort of splits up and follows their different leads to see and sort of sees who can get there first. And of course, Viv and I can't remember her name now, but is it the gnome character? End up getting there, finding the right leads and getting there first. And it turns, because they find the paint at the crime scene, and they figure out that the paint is rare and there's only one place in town that sells it. And then they trick the shopkeeper to give him a name, and then they use the name to figure out where the person lives. And then they break in and they're like, haha, I think it was a Lantern or whatever the character's name is. We've caught you, and I don't know how long you've been posing in this city as this character or whatever. And that's when we find out, because there's somebody comes in the front door and starts hollering up at them for help carrying in the packages or whatever. It turns out that the monster was not the painter after all, but instead the monster is actually in love with and living with the painter. And so Viv, as we've come to know her, is overcome by more empathy and heart than want for violence, and stops her party member from hurting the doppelgram, and sort of just lets them go and live their life and not, no more getting into trouble, sort of thing.
I'll have to read it because
and then afterwards, as they're walking down the street to go meet up with the party, she's like, hey, what's that smell? And it turns out to be a coffee shop, and they go into it, and that's when she learns about coffee.
Yeah, I thought it was a preview for the next book, so that's why I was like, okay. So, but
it is not. It's just a short story in that world. So
Nice.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of cool ideas in here. Like D&D at its core is a role-playing game that is basically a combat engine, right? I mean, the vast majority of the rules in D&D are about combat. I don't know if I was going to play this setting as a game. If I was going to play Legends and Lattes as a game, I don't know that I would play it in D&D. There are other games that can handle that better.
There's a genre of other cozy RPGs that are out there. Yes, about bed and breakfast. I'm currently playing a solo game called Kuriko Magical Year, which is more similar to Kiki's Delivery Service of a witch going to the shop. But yeah, there's that whole genre of games that exists out there too.
And honestly, Fate I think could handle it pretty easily too.
Yep.
This is not a story that I would tell it through D&D as a game. But there are lots of fun, cool character ideas. Like we talked about the time, the gnome that's unstuck from time sort of character, and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of, I like the idea of we didn't really win in as much as we stopped the bad guy, but they kind of did this to themselves. There's a little bit of like a Greek mythology to this, and that the bad guy kind of wins, but in winning they lose. And in losing you kind of were okay, like it was fine. I like that kind of story, and I feel like there's a challenge in doing that in D&D, because it's so different from the norm that players may reject it. But I think that it's a fun challenge to try to sort of explore and see if you could come up with a cool conclusion to an adventure where that is the case.
Yeah, and also finding ways to reward in-game if that's what you want. When players bring good things to the world, that's what they get back from it.
Right.
Which is along lines also, I think, of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Too, right?
And I think I mentioned this, I don't remember, it might have been before we started recording, but if you wanted to take the downtime of the characters doing things during downtime and using the DMG mechanics for it and whatever, and really flesh it out and turn this into multiple sessions, turn this year of downtime into multiple sessions and really play it out and role play it and whatever, this is a good example of the kind of thing that can happen, and how that could go.
But also, you would believe a modification of the Bastion rules that they have in the new game, where you can build up a place that you occupy, that you operate, and all that, add a bunch of just narrative story that you just develop over time.
Yeah.
You might not use the main aspects of D&D, but you can still have your characters do these things. And
you can have moments in your D&D game that evoke this kind of story.
Yeah, and then there's that game I think I've talked about before, the Brindlewood Bay, which is a dark and cozy mystery game.
Okay.
That involves some horror elements, but they have this whole mechanic, like you have to do cozy time in addition to the other stuff you're doing, and that reinforces that feels like a cozy game at the very least. And I think you could bring that to D&D if that's what you wanted. I know it's probably a little bit of it might feel a little bit of a mismatch, but it might actually be kind of cool.
Mm-hmm. And you could really lean into the downtime parts of D&D and bring that sort of cozy feel to it pretty well. Cool. Now I've got to look up Brindlewood Bay. All right. Any other thoughts on Legends and Lattes?
It is a good book. It is fun.
I made a good pick this time. Yes.
I'm actually curious about the sequel too. I know you gave a good. So.
Yeah, honestly, there was enough time in between listening to the first book and the second book that I didn't even realize. At first, I'm like, what's this book going to be about? Like, the character's story kind of came to a head and like whatever, and I'd forgotten her name. So when the next book started and it was like, oh, it's just a different character in this world, and it took me a while before I realized, no, that's the same character. We're getting a prequel. But so I'll be curious to see what the third book is like, because as I look at the cover of it, don't know that I see Viv on the cover.
Oh.
So we'll see. All right. Well, then I think we will call this the end of this episode. I want to say thank you to our patrons at patreon.com/The Tome Show. Special thanks goes out to Michael Harrison, Doug Palmer, Hyperlexic, and new monthly shout out patron, Trash Panda. I do appreciate everybody who's willing to help chip in and help make the show possible, even if it's for as little as $1 a month. I really do appreciate that. It helps me keep the thing going and going strong. Every now and then I can, get somebody a microphone if they've got technical issues, or just pay the bills or whatever. So.
And then if you'd like to contact us, you can send email, thetomeshow@gmail.com. You can find us on various social medias. I'm Sarah Dark Magic, that's Sarah with an H. Jeff is Squatch, SQACH, and Eric is Eric M. Pack, that's Pack with a Q.
And also, in May, here in Ottawa, Canada, you can find me at Can Games 2026. We're currently have it open for new games, and probably start in February, March for registration. So it's what we call here in Ottawa, a May long weekend, Victory Day weekend. So May 15 to May 17. So you can come play games. So,
say you've been doing Can Games for a long time.
Yes.
I know you used to come down to Gen Con as well, but I don't think you've come down recently.
I have not come down since the pandemic started.
Okay. I know I stopped going because of grad school a few years before the pandemic, but I know you used to come down every year with pockets full of maple candy for everybody.
Yes, maple candy and other candy, including some coffee crisps, which is that's how I like my coffee, crisp.
So go hang out at Can Games and find Eric, and maybe he'll have some maple candy to share. Although maybe that's not as rare in Ottawa.
It's not as rare as other films, but I can get some.
Yeah, there you go. Perfect. All right. Well, then I guess that's the end of our episode. Yes. Oh, Tracy didn't say the bit about if you want to find show notes or other shows, you can go to thetomeshow.com. Eric snuck in with his Can Games bit, but we're going to call that the end of our chat about Legends and Lattes. I'm going to go up and make I don't like coffee, but I'm going to go make myself a mug of tea before bed. Probably have to be decaf at this point in the night, but that's okay. But next month, we are going to be reading Shadow Shaper. And until then, keep turning the page, Tomites.
I'm on the wall.